Quality was the top priority, and we never backed away from making something higher quality. And there have certainly been articles that I probably pushed too hard at some time to reach that quality level, certainly by today's standard, but I would say even by those standards back then. But quality was always the number one thing. It had to be amazing. It's that last 10% that's 90% of the value of a game, and the last 1% that makes it a massive hit or not. And so to every pixel, we cared about everything that came out of the game, and we were just unrelenting.
That was Jason Rubin, founder of Naughty Dog, talking about finishing and the ethos of quality that they had at Naughty Dog.
What's his title right now at Meta?
VP of Experiences.
That's the title, VP of Experiences.
Well, gee, now you're making me go fact check.
No, it's like I was talking to my wife about it, and she's like, and my kids were there. She just casually said, because I'm like, yeah, he's working on the metaverse stuff, and then she just like casually said, yeah, billions of people use that software. And I was like, that's so true. Billions, Alex. Like
billions.
Not 200 million, 300. It's billions used.
It is mind-boggling,
you know
isn't it? Between Facebook, Instagram, Threads, WhatsApp, like my wife's family is all on WhatsApp together. I'm on Instagram.
Yeah, my
all the
family
time.
too.
Are we going to talk about?
Oh yeah, the quote.
The quote. We can talk about
it.
it after. Hey, we can talk about it after.
Well, you always ruin the episode because you tell everybody what's going to happen.
Okay, fine.
Just kidding.
Fine.
Well, that's a good quote though. Like the one you put it on, and I was like, yeah, that kind of means crunch sometimes, And you're like, no, it doesn't. And I think we should talk about that because that 1% he's right. It usually is like the 10% and then the 1%, there's these little
that
details.
Phrase, last 10% is 90% of the work. That doesn't mean it has to be crunch. I mean, it is if you forget that you got to really hone at the end and you don't plan for it. That I think that's a lot of where crunch came from when we were younger and we didn't realize. We thought, we would just make something and it would be done. And the iterative nature of creative is like you finish something and then it's not done.
Right. I actually thought about this recently because what you just said, though, the early days crunch and like two things. First, I think crunch is healthy. I know that sounds crazy. It's a hot take. But I think if you're working on something and you're trying to meet a deadline and you're a little behind and you want to make it awesome, being able to crunch, I think, is a good thing because it actually brings teams together in those moments of like in the trenches, and there is positives to it, right?
Okay, you should tease that out because I think crunch is a bit of a trigger word, I think, and there's probably a lot of people rolling
we
their
can
eyes
change
right
the word
now. Well,
over
no,
time.
I mean, I think I know what you're saying. I mean, there is definitely having urgency. I would say having urgency. Helps you focus. It helps a group of people focus on the right things, especially if you have the right people around. So I would say, like when we would be working on something and there'd be like an E3 coming up or a demo. Oh, we have to give a demo to the boss, or we have to give a demo to a customer or something like that.
Or a publisher.
Yeah, that always drove urgency
Milestones.
and focus, and you would work on a singular deliverable or something, and that was always really good, really good. I agree with that part. I think crunch implies that somebody is forcing somebody else to make a decision to prioritize their work over their personal life, which is I would say is
it's like working
thing.
out though, right? It's like working out. It's you're lifting heavy things. If you're always lifting heavy things, it's not good. But if you spend 1 hour a day lifting heavy things, So, but the other thing I was going to say when you said the early days, I was thinking about there's like a lot of bridges, like even the Golden Gate Bridge, or just like the buildings in New York City. These were built by people a long time ago, and we're all happily living in it now, or using these things. But people died and like worked really hard to make those things, right? And I think the game industry has that same kind of like, it's not the same, but you know what I mean? Like there was now it's figuring itself out. Like construction is better now. Less people die now when you build stuff thank God. But like, you know what I mean? So I was thinking, like,
I guess I
we had to
never
go
thought
through
about
that.
it that way. Yeah, we went through a lot of pain, creating the digital infrastructure of the world, like we went through a lot of pain creating the physical infrastructure of the modern world.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There was a lot of ups and downs and figuring stuff out, and a lot of people now that are working in the industry. Like you talk about it all the time. Whenever we like the just E3, like, we talk about it. Oh, in a future, E3 was a trade show, and that's gone because that part of the industry is gone too.
Yeah. I think here's the takeaway. Don't forget to plan for that last 10%, and then don't forget to plan for the last 1%, because that's how you get from good to great to amazing. All right. And with that, hope you enjoy this episode of The Fourth Curtain featuring Jason Rubin.
Leveling up your game dev career, but not sure where to start?
Maybe you're trying to break into the industry, looking to connect with other people who are making games.
Consider joining the International Game Developers Association, the IGDA, the world's largest nonprofit, member-driven professional association serving all individuals who create games.
I was in the IGDA in Chicago, met a lot of people. Great way to network.
The IGDA exists to support and empower game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers.
Discounts,
Educational and advocacy-based resources,
mentorship.
and solidarity across 160 plus chapters.
To join the IGDA, visit igda.org/membership and use the code IGDA 4th Curtain 15. No spaces there.
To get 15% off 1- and 2-year memberships, as well as a student membership.
Joining the IGDA is a great move for your career, and as a nonprofit supporting everyone making games, it's a great move for the whole community. Join today. Welcome to the program, everyone. Today we have someone quite remarkable on the show, Jason Rubin. Jason co-founded Naughty Dog Studios back in the 80s. We were just talking about how many decades it's
Been a long
Jason.
time.
It's a non-trivial number. Yes. Where you made Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter. Yeah. I think those are probably two of the biggest cornerstone titles for the PS2, which is really PS2 really when console became glorious. So, wow, you've been quite an outspoken in the past. I don't know if you still are. I think so, but an outspoken advocate for talent in our industry and credit where credit's due. President of THQ for a hot minute. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
I'm more than happy to talk about it.
I want to hear about the 40 years. The 40-year thing is the first game.
Yes, more than a hot minute. And the last 10 years has been helping to build the metaverse.
Yeah, starting that process. That's right.
Yes, to create VR games, experiences, all at Meta. Jason, welcome to the show. So great to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I can't believe you. So before we started recording, you said you published your first game 40 years ago. Is that right?
It's 40 years next year.
40 years next year.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a game called Ski Craze for the Apple II, published by a small publisher called Vaudeville, but it did sell nationally. It was in a box, and we didn't do it. Someone else did. So I consider that an entry to the industry. Our first major title was Keep the Thief for Electronic Artists, which is now called Electronic Arts. 2 years later,
that company.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been a long, long time. My, has the industry changed?
It has changed a little bit. But I got to say, you look great. I don't believe it's been 40 years. You look great.
Thank you. Well, 40 years behind a monitor, so you don't age, right? No,
You're like preserved from all the.
That's right. Sheltered from the dangers of the outside world. So you said it was ski craze, is that right?
Ski Craze for the Apple II. That's right. I went
for the
like
Apple
a sports
II
game.
It was. It came very close to perfectly simulating what skiing was not. It was an Apple. You have to remember, Apple computers didn't have yellow, so like we had like 4 colors. I guess technically 8 colors, 2 of which were white, 2 of which were black, and then so like everything was pretty simple. But I had come back from a skiing weekend, and I put it together in a weekend, and my coding skills were so bad it would slow down the farther down the hill you got, right? Because there was, and so I had
The
to,
opposite of speed.
I had this friend named Andy Gavin, and I took it to him, and I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, but like the art's okay for the time, but the code is crap. And Andy made it better, and together we published it with a company called Vaudeville, and yeah, that was the first game we put out, and I probably made $1,000, $2,000, but I was 15, so I was
Wow,
rolling.
15. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Exactly.
what a-
Wow. I mean, 85. Let's hope I was only I was older then. I really am old now. So yeah, and then we signed another game with Vaudeville, Dream Zone. We put it out a year later, and then we cold called the front desk of Electronic Artists, now Electronic Arts, and got a producer on the line. And he's, oh, I love that game, Dream Zone. Of course, you guys can work for us. We'll give you $15,000 budget. And I was like, what? No way.
Wait, how old were you then?
16 or 17. The game came out when we were 17, so probably 16 at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, my parents and Andy's parents had to sign our contracts on our behalf because we were minors. Like, we couldn't just be signing away contracts and getting money.
You programmed you were a programmer? Do you teach yourself how to program? How'd you learn how to program?
I am a programmer to what someone who uses Midjourney is to art, I guess. I am capable of the minimum, but like, can I like call myself a programmer? No. But the first games we did were, or at least I did, where it was in BASIC, and it was using a shape toolkit that allowed you to do sprites on a system that didn't really know what a sprite was, that had been written by Vaudeville. And, that was enough to do a game that you could publish at the time. Our second title wasn't in BASIC. And, clearly by the time we got to anything we did for Electronic Arts, that was written in a real programming language, so to speak, and well beyond my ability. But even to this day, like I can, if you give me a simple language, I can program a game. I'm just not, obviously not well beyond my abilities. And beyond Andy, we hired some absolutely incredible programmers over the year, and they still have some of the best in the industry working for them on what is still a proprietary engine. So, still doing what we did all along. Yeah, I'm not a programmer.
But you grew up, you had an Apple II, I'm guessing?
I did. I got it for my 13th birthday. And so 2 years later, I was making money. And that was the first and last computer that my parents ever bought for me. Everything else, all of Naughty Dog's equipment, when we sold it to Sony, and 15 years later, 2001, 15, 16 years later, all of that equipment was purchased without a loan based on the success of previous titles, all of which were funded by the first two computers that Andy and my father bought for us.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. And my father is now living next door to me here. My kids are like, his grandkids run over to him. And like basically everything that's happened since then was a smart decision to get a geek a computer in 1983. Like, he thought it would, people who are listening don't understand. Like, this was actually a really big deal for a law professor to decide. And then, I'm very lucky. I came from a background that was very comfortable, but the law professor decided at the time that he was going to give about 2 months of his salary to buying a birthday present for his child, which, it was a big deal for him to do that, because that's all I asked for 3 years was a computer. That's all I wanted. And in return for that, he created a career, that lasts effectively till today.
Yeah, well, and it's not just your career, but I mean, you've hired hundreds probably, at least, so
Absolutely.
yeah.
And many of them have gone off to form their own developers and are now, CEOs and or one of the senior team building separate games. So there's no question, like that's the business. And
Apple II back in 85 would have cost
like
probably
$700.
Oh no, it was more than that. I
more
think
than that.
we spent closer to like $4,000 on the entire thing.
$4,000.
Because remember, everything was unbundled back then. So you had the Apple II computer. Okay, now you actually want a little bit of extra memory in it because it came with 48K. You wanted 64K. Okay, you got to pay for the extra memory. You need the extra memory, by the way. Oh, you want to store something? Like you actually want to read information? It's not just you turn it on and you just type stuff in and that's all you have. Oh, you need a disk drive. Well, that's $500-$600 at the time, right? You want a monitor too. Oh, you want color? What are you, highfalutin here? What do you want color? The 80s term or whatever.
Super
Yes.
Oh,
VGA.
okay. Well,
Yes.
yeah, that monitor is going to cost you damn near $1,000, right? And oh, you want to print stuff out. I think you want to use this for class or something. Okay, that printer is not cheap either. And then the cables and the desk and whatever. Like it all came to about $4,000, which somebody can go in and put in 1985, 83 and $4,000. That's going to be a lot more money today for
Yeah.
inflation.
Oh, yeah.
And salaries have gone up, you know, and he had just joined a law firm from being a law professor. Like I said, he was a teacher. So
Why'd you want the computer? What was the reason?
I
Like games?
it wasn't really games in the beginning. Like I loved games. I remember playing, you know, even some of the earliest games in the arcade. I played Pong in an arcade. So, but it was really, I think what did it was I saw Star Wars. It's in '77 in the theater at 7. And I came out of that and I was like, well, there is a better career than lawyer, which is what my father was. I'm like, lawyer doesn't sound that interesting to a 7-year-old, but making something like Star Wars, which blew me away. I mean, here's a person creating a world that entertains other people, and look at the joy he created, not to mention the toys and everything else that I wanted for Christmas or the holidays. And so I was like, you know, I want to make movies. And my father was like, okay, sure, whatever. We were in Gainesville, Florida. Like didn't grow up in LA. I came here later. And, you know, back then, even like it would have been a kind of camera, if you can hear that. Like, you know, it would have been literally film, 8mm rolling. I'd like, you're not going to buy that for a 7 or 8-year-old. Like nobody would be that crazy. So, I wanted a VHS recorder. Go look at what a VHS recorder looked like back then. It was 2 suitcases, one of which was on your shoulder.
I had one of those, yeah.
Entire VHS suspended off your back on a $9,000, in which today again is a lot more money. And if forget that, you're not going to get that. You can go make, draw things on paper. And so after a while, I came up with this idea that if I asked for a computer, I might get one because he'd think I'd use it for school. And it worked.
Smart. Okay, so you get this computer. You're a teenager. You got a buddy, Andy. You guys go to school together?
Yeah, we went to Hebrew school together. So we were in different states, but the border was right between us. And yeah, we went to Hebrew school together. Where I learned nothing, to be clear.
Well, you met Andy.
Yeah, I gained a lot, but I learned nothing.
Right. How long between your, teenage ventures and Naughty Dog? When did Naughty Dog start?
Yeah, I'll go through it really quickly. So in '85, the first game Ski Craze we published under the title Jam Software, which stood for Jason, Andy, and Mike. Jason and Andy being 2 people we've talked about. Mike gave us $127 to buy the previously mentioned Sprite toolkit that we talked about. And we realized at that point that was the limit of his contribution, bought him out slightly later, changed it to Jason and Andy's Magic, which is about the worst name you could ever have.
Magic.
I kind of like it.
Well,
that's cool.
Yeah,
actually, it is kind of.
It also
What was the magic?
Aaron, we gotta go look up that. We gotta look up that URL.
18.
We get the URL.
What kind of magic do you want? The first 2 games for Vaudeville were under Jam Software. And then when we talked to EA said, look, love to work with you, but we did a trademark search. You guys are pretty young. You probably haven't thought of this. It turns out there is a Jam Software that we've worked with before, and they have the trademark to Jam Software in Australia. So you probably don't want to use that name. You need 48 hours to come up with a new name because we're ready to go with this contract. And honestly, I don't remember how we love dogs. I thought it was a cool name. Andy thought it was a cool name. So we came up with Naughty Dog. And I remember Trip Hawkins, when we told him, he looked at me, he was like, that is the worst name I've ever heard for a company. Like, let me explain how this works. You have Microsoft, MicroProse, IntelliPlay, Electronic Arts. You come up with a name that's like 2 things and you jam them together and they're techie, and that's what it is. And I was like, I like Naughty Dog. Okay. And we may have been the first, kind of not boring name that came out.
Yeah.
But, now everybody does whatever the hell they want, which is the right thing to do. And Naughty Dog turned out to be a fantastic name for the company. So Keith the Thief, first title under the new Naughty Dog name. That was 1987.
Were you guys still out east, or had you moved to LA by then?
At that time, we were in college, I think. And so I had moved to Michigan and he was in Pennsylvania. But we were doing this over modem, like basically phone calls and modem because there's no internet, right? And then we brought out Rings of Power in 91. That was our first cartridge game. That's kind of an interesting story. We stumbled upon EA reverse engineering the Sega Genesis, which is another story that you can look up. And Andy said, wait a minute, you're reverse engineering the Sega Genesis. They said, okay, NDA. And we said, before the NDA, we really want to work on a cartridge. Fine, just sign the NDA. And so we made Rings of Power was our first cartridge game. And then we basically got sick of cartridges and quit the industry because, it's $20 to make a cartridge, $18, whatever. And there's so many long stories. Like, we don't have enough time, but basically Andy and I were like, to hell with that. I went off to join the special effects industry, and he went, off to get his master's or PhD at MIT. And Trip Hawkins called up again. And he's like, we got this new CD-ROM drive based thing called the 3DO. And you know what a CD cost to print? $1. And it went down very quickly from there. And so all of its profit for whoever makes whatever they're making. We're like, how much memory is that? They're like 600 megs or whatever it had at the time. We're like, whoa, we'll never use all that. And so 3DO, Way of the Warrior, had a bidding war on Way of the Warrior because everyone got the CD and they started making these like movie game type things because the CD could play video and they were all pretty much crap. And there was this real fighting game that someone made. We had this idea, well, there's no Mortal Kombat, there's no Street Fighter for 3DO. We'll make the Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter. Would have been fine if they had diagonal buttons that worked on the controllers, but you can also read about that. They did not, and diagonal buttons are very useful in a controller, especially one that uses the standard old Street Fighter moves. So that game did okay. 3DO didn't do that okay. But there was a bidding war to publish it, and the winner of the bidding war, because we were excited about Hollywood getting into the industry, was Universal Studios. And so we moved cross country. Andy left grad school. I was basically full-time making games. We both headed out to Los Angeles and started making what ended up becoming Crash Bandicoot. And we came up with the idea on the way across country in the car, because we drove across country with everything we owned in that car. And the idea was pretty simple. It worked pretty well for us trying to make a fighting game when there was no fighting game for the system. Why don't we make the Mario or the Sonic, for Sony? Because Sony's coming out with hardware. We knew that. They don't have one. Like, they're not going to have a mascot. So we'll just do it. Right. And here's two 23-year-olds, probably that 24-year-old, roughly. Like, Andy's 6 months younger than me. So he was probably 23. I was probably 24. Like, yeah, right. We'll just take on Miyamoto and sure.
No sweat.
That's
what could be easier. And started making this game. And and Sony didn't know about the game either because they had two types of deals. They had publishing deals and developer deals. Everyone but us had signed a publisher deal. We got a developer deal, and it was weird. The developer deal didn't require you to tell Sony what you were working on. So we were able to work on Crash Bandicoot without telling anybody. And then Universal was our publisher, but they didn't sign the deal. We did. And eventually we went to Sony and we're like, look, we've got this thing. You don't have, a mascot character. They hadn't thought of that. Wouldn't it be nice? And kind of the rest is history. Although they never adopted Crash as the mascot. Crash was one of their big games. I think Sony was smart. They got ahead of look, adults are going to play video games. We can't have only mascots. So we don't want to have a mascot, but we do want a character action game because there's still a pretty big audience that likes character action games. We need one. Crash Bandicoot, we'll publish it, deal with Universal, et cetera, et cetera.
So A, wow. And then B, was it really just you two? Like at the beginning, like coming up with Crash Bandicoot in the car?
Yes.
On the drive?
Yes. But so to be clear, because I want to make sure everyone gets credit, when we came to LA, Universal, in order to manage such crazy young kids, and there were two of us, the other was Insomniac, just to give you an idea of how smart Universal was in the beginning, right? They found someone to manage these two young teams, and that was Mark Cerny. And Mark Cerny then, as producer, was our producer. And certainly as soon as we landed in Los Angeles, like he had a hand going forward from there. And we started hiring people very quickly. So that was the first game where Andy and I had employees, Taylor Kurosaki, Bob Raffi, Dave Baggett. Those were the first three, Charlotte Francis, Justin Mona. Everybody basically got hired at that point. And, but Crash was made with 8 people plus Mark.
Oh, wow. The team was only 8 people?
It was 8 people. We didn't do all our sound. Like there was, the music was done by Music Mutato, a guy named Josh Mansell. Like we didn't do the sound effects. Universal had a sound team. So there are a lot of people that were involved. Obviously, Sony had their marketing department. They had their comms department. They had their producers. I don't want to leave anyone out, but the actual team that was up all night was 8 people. And then you add Mark Cerny as a producer. That was it. We had a producer that he wasn't that helpful, named Dave Siller. And so it was really the 8 people plus Mark Cerny.
How influential was Mark in the development?
Yeah, Mark was effectively a 9th Naughty Dog. It's just that, he wasn't at Naughty Dog, he was at Universal. And all he knew was making games. Like that's what he did his whole life. So he was extremely influential in the first Crash and the second Crash and the third Crash, in all of them. So yeah. And CTR worked.
What year was this? This would have been
94. We started Crash. We finished the Crash series and released the last one in 99. So 94, we started Crash. 96, we did Crash. 97, Crash 2. 98, Crash 3. 99, Crash Team Racing. And yes, that burnt me the hell out.
I bet. Well, in that time period, I'm guessing you grew from 8 people to something larger. How big, like over those 3-4 years, how big did the team get, the studio get?
Yeah, certainly Crash 2 was larger, but it was probably no more than double. Crash 3 was larger again, but I don't think it was probably triple. And I think, and this could be wrong, by the time we finished Crash Team Racing, we were in like the 30s somewhere, people.
Huh, okay.
And some of those people were working on Jak and Daxter, including Mark and Andy and Stephen White, who was one of our senior programmers. So Crash Team Racing wasn't done by all of them because some of them were off working on the engine to get our first PlayStation 2 title, which was Jak and Daxter, to come out. So still tiny. I mean, budget-wise, you're talking a couple $1 million at most for the budgets for the Crash Bandicoot titles. And then by the time you get to PlayStation 2, you're talking budgets in the $14 million, $20 million range. Now we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars for AAA titles. And it's radically changed. And, it's not that long when you really think about it. 2000 would have been roughly when we finished the Crash series in the 2 million range. And here we are in 2023, and we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on games. That's what's happened to the industry in that period of time.
What effect do you think that really has on the kinds of games that come out?
Well, the industry's diversified greatly. I mean, back then, the gateway to get a title on the market was pretty high because, the vast majority of gameplay was on the consoles, and the consoles had pretty strong gateways of publishers that were able to publish on it. You couldn't just put something out.
Right.
The internet changed a lot of that. Certainly like id figuring out how to get Doom to people's hands without going through a publisher. It was also sold through a publisher. But when I downloaded Doom, I downloaded it for free, played the first third of the game and paid for the other 2/3. Like that was a revolution. People think of it as a revolution in technology. It was, but it was also a revolution in the way that you reach consumers because it went entirely around the publishing ecosystem. Mobile was the web. These two things were massive changes in the way that you reach consumers. So, the console business has gotten much larger, but has been eclipsed now by the mobile business, which is larger than the console business. And the entire industry has gone from what would have been back then $20 or $40 billion a year to, $100+ billion. I think we're headed towards 200 billion either if we haven't crossed
at 200. We're almost at 200.
Right. So, the industry has kept pace with the increase in the cost of the budgets. And the number of people playing games has gone absolutely through the roof. And, one of the things that I'm constantly saying is that the core game audience, however you define that, may be small. The number of gamers or people that call themselves gamers is significantly larger than that, but not that large. But the number of people who play games, including many who would say, I'm not a gamer, is massive. Right. And,
Massive.
Meta, for example, has a business.
Everybody.
Meta is a business in web games that really, it's, you can think of it as the Farmville business, but that's not, that title actually shut down. Those titles are played by, adults in their 50 plus range in age of years. And it's a very large business, very successful business. They're very happy playing. If you ask them, you're a 60-year-old woman, are you a gamer? Hell no, I'm not a gamer. I'm not anything like, but she's playing games. And so the game industry has just radically changed in its reach, which is awesome. I mean, we're all playing and we're all having fun. And that, to me, this industry is it's good because it brings that joy to people in the end.
I agree. I think what you said is really interesting. It's like some of these games are 100 million plus to make, but there are also so many more ways to get into playing games where it's not that necessarily that, mobile, Facebook, etc., Steam.
Yeah, and at the top, GTA, I think they announced they passed 150 million units sold. To give you an idea, the Crash games were at the top of the PlayStation 1 charts, and we sold somewhere in the order of 10 million of each of them. So the size of your audience, assuming you're cross-platform, PC, et cetera, has also gone through the roof. And with post-sale monetization, which Crash didn't have, you sold the disc, that was it. You never talked to your audience. You had no feedback on what they were doing. You couldn't, sell them skins or anything else. Like GTA makes a decent amount of money on its online version. So the monetization has changed incredibly over that period too. And different people have different opinions on whether that's good or bad. I think the arguments in all directions are probably all right and all wrong, depending on who you are and what you like. I think there's significant audience that wants things to be free and is happy paying for certain things when they want to and not paying up front and seeing if things are good. There's another audience that's equally as correct that says, I want to give you $60 or $70 and I want to play this thing for most of my free time and be done with it. And that's, both of those things are fine. They're business models and they should both be enabled, and consumers certainly has a right to fight back if they don't think they're being treated fairly. But additional business models is also, I think, good for the business.
Yeah, there used to be one flavor, and now there's many. A lot
of people out of gaming because I don't want to buy a console. I'm not sure I'll like it. There's things that look like I might like it, but it's a few $100s, and I don't want to take that risk. And then each one of them is money up front, and I don't know if I'm going to like it. For some people, that's fine. Like for me, that was fine. I know what I like up front. But for other people, they didn't want that. And then mobile phones came out and said, well, just try it. And if you like it, you can pay for it when you like it.
Yeah.
And yeah, there may be more churning because that's what works. But there are people that are okay with that. And, for me, as long as people are happy, that's fine. If you're not happy, you should tell the people who are making you unhappy.
What do you like?
Yeah. What kind of games are you playing these days?
What are you playing?
Well...
Give us the job related answer, and then you can plus
well, the
that.
Job-related answer is true is I do play a lot of VR games, and I do love them. And I think Asgard's Wrath is going to blow people away. It really, for the first time, we're saying this is why you want to be in VR playing a game, and it can be as big and as grand as the things you're playing on other headsets or on consoles. What I play in my free time, because I have two daughters who are 5 and 10, and both of those are too young for VR or at least our VR headset right now, is a lot of metaverse type titles, because that's actually what they're playing, which is one of the reasons I believe so much in the metaverse in general. For me, Roblox is a little more challenging to play. Like I don't get the joy out of it that I get out of the games that I would choose. My daughters get the joy, and I have. I mean no offense at that. It's not my type of game. I also don't get that much joy out of sports games.
I'm with you.
I love sports. I love the fact that sports games exist. I can't play them. They don't make me excited. There's nothing wrong with sports. But I do also play a good deal of Fortnite with my 10-year-old. Huh. And I'm a subscriber because that was financially made the most sense for me. This is to the point of business model. It's like I got it for free. I started buying my daughter skins when she wanted them. And I was like, I'm not going to pay a penny. I don't need, I would like to have that. And then eventually I was like, I want to be in the seasons. And then if you're in enough seasons, you're like, oh, hell with it. $11.99. Why not? Take my money, Tim. So my daughter and I, this is one of my ways to wind down every day, play Fortnite. And last night we got second. We only play a couple rounds a night on school nights. Last night we were in second place. And the night before, the two of us got, we won.
Hey.
So that's a happy daddy moment.
I know. Doesn't that feel good?
one more like aging myself, happy daddy moment. Like I just have to put this out there because it makes me so proud. The first time, and this is over a year ago, that I got shot, I got down, and my daughter ran over, picked me up, threw me on her shoulders, ran behind a buffer, and revived dad at 9. I was like, I had reached peak dad.
Yes.
Like that moment, I could not keep my heart from bursting out of myself with love. Like it was like, holy shit.
That's good.
I'm sorry if you're not allowed to cuss on this program.
Oh, no, cuss away.
I never thought at 7 or 10 when I was starting at 15, I never thought I'd be at a point where my daughter would revive me and we'd go on to compete.
Yep, she carried you. You were the carry.
She carried me.
Literally. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so Aaron and I are actually building games in Fortnite right now, and it's like when you're talking about when you're talking about like what it was like in 1994, which is basically when I started. How just a couple of people or a handful of people could make something that could really resonate with a large audience. How accessible that was. What has gotten me super excited when new platforms came. I got excited when the App Store came out. I got excited when the VR marketplace came out. I got excited when UEFN was launched. Is that when these new platforms arrive, anything's possible, and the tools just seem to get more and more accessible. And with Fortnite, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with it, because anybody who's got the game can be a maker. And, there's a lot of people in South America who play Fortnite. I think we'll see games coming from places that traditionally we haven't, like in Africa, that we'll see developers that we don't usually see on the scene. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, in fact, there's a pretty big game development market in Africa. And, I at one point was going to go to Kenya to speak to some. And I think the democratization of development of games is one of the best things that's happened. It was hard when I started, when you started. It's much easier.
You had to have a computer that was basically the cost of a car,
Well, you also had to sign a contract with somebody else to distribute it in a very complex manner that if you didn't grow up with a lawyer as a father, as I did and Andy did, isn't necessarily second nature. And, now you could just say, I hit a button and it's published. And, if people like it, there's an monetization there. And I don't have to deal with servers, and I don't have to deal with the infrastructure that even a lot of mobile developers have to deal with now. And these metaverse tools like Horizon, like Fortnite, like Roblox really are soup to nuts, providing you with the ability to reach the audience. And the only thing you have to do is make something interesting.
That's right.
And as the technology gets better and the ability to make more interesting things gets better, that's why I'm so excited about this. It's like every kid everywhere should be able to say, I'm interested in making games. I'm going to give it a shot and not have to go through. I was lucky. I got through, the gauntlets that you had to get through to get where I got. I would like a lot more kids to get the top of the funnel, and creativity and skill, maybe a little luck, be the things that hold them back, not all of the nonsense that the old world of publishing put in front of you.
Yeah.
Why worry about that? Like, why do you care where the cloud server is, or why do you care how many you pay for, or what? Let the provider deal with that and scrape a little. And all you got to do is say, here's what I think people would like. I'm going to take a stab at it. And also a lot more different things get built. And so, whereas you might not have found a game that spoke to you 20 years ago because there weren't a lot being made, now there's an infinite number, and some niche at the tail end of things is actually your jam, and that's what you end up spending your time on. To me, that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It's also, being an old person like me, it's also a little scary.
Why?
Because there's like 100,000 kids making games. I can't keep up with that.
Yeah, that's right. There's like 12-year-olds making millions now. It's amazing. Yeah.
All right. Well, so, we didn't really we haven't even gotten past Naughty Dog yet.
I missed the school part. So you went to Hebrew school. I'm assuming that was during your high school.
That was junior high. We started in junior high, and then we were when I hit 13, it was bar mitzvah, sure, whatever. You didn't even say the word correctly, get the hell out of my temple. Rabbi, get the hell out. And then from that point on, Andy and I had a business, and we were incorporated, and we were doing everything we needed to do. So
you didn't go to college?
No, I did. I went to college. I went to Michigan. Andy went to
Wolverine.
Haverford.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What'd you study? What was your What was your
Economic.
like economics?
Yeah. Yeah. Economics. I
Nice.
mean, I didn't really go to class a lot because I kind of had this side gig going on that was paying the bills. But I got a degree, which I've never used. And Andy went on to master's degree in computer science, artificial intelligence at MIT. And then I sucked him out of that to go make games, and ended up being the right decision for him because we did okay. So yeah, I mean, I basically have been working on games, give or take that short period where Andy and I got pissed off at cartridges. And well, really quickly, I've told that story twice, so that's how it happened. We sold out of Rings of Power in a week and a half, 2 weeks. And they had printed, I don't know, 50,000, 100,000. So it was like, at that time for cartridges, that was a pretty good launch for a title. And so we got on the phone, we were all excited, and they're like, good news, you sold out. And we're like, we heard, that's so amazing. And they're like, bad news, we're not printing anymore. We're like, what the hell? What kind of, they're like, well, here's the deal. You've got a battery in your cartridge for a save game, and there's this other game that doesn't have a battery. And since you're an RPG and you're like 100 hours, 200 hours long, it was an endless game, you're much more memory. So they're a cheaper cartridge. So your cartridge costs $18 and their cartridge costs $12.50 or whatever it was. And also, we think you both have an equal chance. And yeah, maybe even they have a little better chance, but we make $6 more a copy. So we're just going to print only them because we only get an allotment of X number of units, whatever. Madden.
Yes.
That was the title.
Oh, wow.
EA.
So we're like, to hell with this. It's one thing if you make a game that no one likes, so be it. But if you make a game that people like and they don't print any more of them or whatever, you're like, this is not fair, right?
Yeah.
I can't decide what's going to happen. I understand the business, but there's a,
Yes.
and so that's why we.
So you guys rage
That's
quit.
why you don't like sports
Yeah.
games.
Yes,
Yeah,
you got-
that's why he doesn't like
you got
sports
Madden.
games.
We totally rage quit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so here's a question for you. So what did you guys do? Like when you started Naughty Dog and built Naughty Dog, what did you do to make that such a enduring studio? Like it's always been successful, still successful. There's got to be something in the air inside those walls that you guys set up that endures. Yes? No?
I would hope so, and I would like to believe so. I think Neil Druckmann recently did an interview somewhere that I read that he said that Andy and I had never relented on quality. Like quality was the top priority, and we never backed away from making something higher quality. And there have certainly been articles that I probably pushed too hard at some time to reach that quality level, certainly by today's standards, but I would say even by those standards back then. But quality was always the number one thing. It had to be amazing. It's that last 10% that's 90% of the value of a game, and the last 1% that makes it a massive hit or not. And so to every pixel, we cared about everything that came out of the game, and we were just unrelenting. And I haven't been there since I left in 2004. So I can only wave my hands around. And that's why I'm kind of quoting Neil, because he would know much better than I would what's going on. But I can see in their games as I play them that the consistent quality level is still hit and that quality is still job one. I think if anything's changed, it's that we also hit our deadlines. And there's that age-old good, fast, cheap. You can only have one of them, maybe 1.5. We hit 2, which was good and fast, i.e. on time. And now, thankfully, and I think this is the right thing, they slipped here and there. And I don't want to make light of the fact that I'm sure they're working incredibly hard. But our challenge was we tried to do 2 things at once, and we consistently did it. You can't move. The holidays come every year. And as I told you, we brought Crash out every year. And so you can't be a month late. That's not the holidays, right? You're either in the holiday campaign or you're not. So I think to anyone listening, if they do slip a date, know that it's because they're holding quality as the highest priority. And I think that is the secret sauce at Naughty Dog still.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It is also interesting how that has changed too. It's like Christmas was so important, so make or break the holiday season. And to be out in that holiday season, you really had to be done way in advance because of the time to manufacture, the time to ship to retail, and you had to have some confidence in those retail programs where you were buying end caps at Walmart or whatever. And now with digital, it's different. it's a different process. It's another thing that's evolved.
Yeah, to give you an idea, I don't remember why. I would imagine it was because we were late by a week or didn't hit Gold Master on time. But one year there was a choice made at Sony because they all used the same CD manufacturing sites between us and Mariah Carey's album. and that is why
That's a good album, right?
He made them a lot of money. She's a great artist. Like, so especially back then, she was like top of the world. So like, you know, it's very different with the infinite distribution power of the internet. You can come out on any day. And yes, the holidays still matter. But you know, you can also release something and update it. We couldn't update it. You burnt that CD or that cartridge, you had bugs. There was no going back. It was what you did. You can't like you can't say, oh, obviously we need to nerf that thing. It like that gun kills everybody. It's too easy. Let's just nerf it. There was no nerfing it. You had to have it all right the first time. You got one shot at it. And so things have radically changed.
Yeah.
So what happened with the Mariah Carey CD? Did
they printed more
decide to print
cartridges
more?
that year?
So Madden and Mariah Carey.
No. That's what I won. Mariah Carey was the one that rage quit. Because they printed more. They did print the crashes that they needed.
Oh, snap.
And
Okay.
they didn't print the Mariah Carey albums and probably came up short. I don't know what happened. So like, you know, they thought they needed more, whether or not they did or not. I don't know what happened, but I remember that year, that was the big deal. For at least a few days, I was on the phone with Sony saying, well, we're not sure whether we're going to go, you know, because they had to print, we would sell a few million of these things in the first few weeks. And so they had to make that many CDs and they had to get them into boxes and get those boxes to the stores, and the stores had to put them on the shelf. I mean, it sounds like it's an easy thing to do, but it is so much easier to hit publish and have it just suddenly be streamable.
Yeah. This is why Mariah Carey doesn't play PlayStation. This is why, because she rage quit.
Yeah. Well, the CD was what, like $9.99, $10, and a game is what, $30-$40?
No. The CD was $1 or less. Sony charged a licensing fee to publishers to publish, so it was a little more expensive to publishers. But the actual physical good cost $1 or $2. Like it cost nothing.
But compared to the game, I'm saying like when it's on the shelf.
For sure. There was more profit
the game
per
makes
unit. Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't understand you. Yeah. On a per unit basis, for sure. The CD that was in the PlayStation box made a lot more dollars for Sony if they sold one of them. But the print took exactly the same amount of time. I'm sure that weighed into it.
Naughty Dog, those years go by, many big hit titles, and then you're out. You're burned out. Want to do something else? What happened?
Well, for Crash 2 and Crash 3, I had one day out of the office, including weekends and holidays, because of the timeline. And as the team kept getting bigger, it was just getting like worse and worse, the amount of load. And, you know, the thing about the game industry, and you know, some people might dispute this, but this was my lived experience. I never had classical training in running a company. So I didn't know anything about management. And at the time, it didn't seem like we could layer people in the company because we had a bunch of artists, a bunch of texture artists or, you know, modelers or riggers or whatever. And like, who was I to put one person in charge of somebody else? And I kind of did, but I kind of didn't. And so it was a really flat company. And it got to a scale at which it was harder and harder. I would give reviews to, you know, 80 people once a year and bring them in my office for half an hour. And we talk about bonuses, and like, it just became a lot. And I just got more and more tired. And it was like, really, I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, you have no life. You really have no life. This is what you do. And I've always prided myself on, you know, wanting to learn more about the planet, do more, travel, all these things. And I wasn't really doing that. I'd travel. I remember I did a press tour with Ted Price where we hit like 14 cities in 20 days. But all I'd see was, you know, interviews and a dinner and maybe a bar for a few hours. And then if I could sleep, and I'm on another plane. And that, you know, it just wore me out. And I had, you know, I also remember Evan Wells was, you know, incredibly talented. And he was under me. We didn't want to branch to 2 titles because we wanted to keep quality up, and we weren't sure we were going to be able to do that. And to this day, Naughty Dog really hasn't gotten a fully 2-title pipeline. Like we fully believe that like the whole company had to have focus. And so I looked at all these people that were coming up and I was just like, you know what? Maybe if I step out of the way, better for everybody and I can go off and walk the earth. And so that in essence, that's what happened. And Andy decided to follow me. We went away, we did a bunch of stuff. I traveled a lot. I wrote some comic books. I started a startup called Flector. I was using MySpace and I started making my own page and I had friends that were celebrities and they're like, will you help me? I'm like, yeah, I'll make your page. I'm like, really? There should be a tool for this. So I called MySpace. I knew someone there and they're like, yeah, we don't have time for that. So I'm like, I'll build it and I'll sell it to you. So Andy and I started a company with a guy named Jason K. We built the tool. We sold it to them a year and 10 days later. I worked for MySpace for a little while. That got me really interested in like larger audiences than at that time games had, and thinking about non-gaming and stuff like that. I found that was a really helpful period for my growth. Not that I wasn't a gamer, but like it helped me do something that wasn't gaming. And I realized there's a bigger world out there than just the console business and PC business I was in. I mean, started a Facebook gaming company with the same group of people. We made a bunch of games that was profitable, but kind of tossed that out. That wasn't the kind of games I wanted to make. I don't know. I did a bunch of stuff. And then we tried to acquire Take-Two, the private equity company. That fell through. Didn't happen, clearly.
When was that? What year
when
was
that? 2012, 13-ish.
Okay. Was that's
Maybe
before
13,
the current management took over? Before Strauss took over?
No, Strauss was there. It didn't happen. And the private equity company I was working with and the banking company we were working with, commercial banking, they were like, well, what about THQ? And I'm like, well, they kind of screwed the pooch. It's like, the stock's in the trash. They've got a bunch of good teams. They had great teams. They've got good people. And they're like, well, listen, they've kind of jettisoned everything. And it's down to, 10, 15 titles and 8 internal teams. And like, what do you think you could do with it? And so Brian Farrell and I had a few conversations and went in as president. It was a public company with the goal of kind of reorganizing it, trying to avoid bankruptcy. We couldn't avoid bankruptcy because, the books were just not in the right place. And we ended up going into bankruptcy with a stalking horse to buy the company. That means that somebody was saying if it's complicated financial stuff we don't have to get into here, but basically we thought we would end up kind of taking the plane, which had no gas and was headed at the ground. I'm going to try to simplify this. Instead of hitting the ground and exploding, we would pull back on the stick and landing gear would get sheared off, but we would just make it and be able to take it off again. And we'd be that much lighter because we would have picked everything out of the back of the plane that was weighting it down. Didn't quite work that way. And so all the assets were eventually sold off. The people I worked with then ended up, especially the developers, I've worked with them since. That was some of the first developers working, once I joined Oculus, eventually working at Facebook, now Meta, those developers came and worked for Meta because they were like, look, we trust you. We know what you say is true. And you've been good to us and you found us a nice landing. All the developers made it. Volition made it, but unfortunately recently,
yes.
So at least they had the extra, 10 years now?
Yeah.
A decade more to their story. And I love that team. I love the people that ran it. I love that one hurts me, but 4A was there and we put out the South Park game with Matt and Trey. And there were a bunch of good things on the docket. It didn't quite make it.
Yeah.
And after that, I was like, I'm going to join a big company that has no chance of ever going bankrupt because I don't ever want to do that again. And Meta fit that bill. And look, I've always believed in the future, and I am a strong believer that like I said, the 5 and 10-year-old that's my child, and you guys now working on effectively a metaverse, whatever you want to call it, and the words don't even matter.
Yeah,
right.
These spaces of social avatar-based alternate view interactions, whether 2D or VR, because VR is an add-on to that in my opinion is a better end state, but certainly not required. All of these things are going to be incredibly powerful, especially with the younger generations growing up now.
It's the future, dude.
Totally. It's more important to them than a social network in some ways. They identify more with those characters than they do in some ways with aspects of their life. Like it's a real thing. And like for me, working on that, especially as I now have kids that I'm watching grow up, daughters that are, loving this stuff, it's great.
Yeah, actually, it's really interesting to hear you
Metaverse
talk about
wars.
your simple couple sentence definition of metaverse, which I appreciate you breaking it down that way, because the word metaverse has so much baggage on it.
It has an incredible amount of baggage. You don't even need to use it.
Right.
Like, to me, the VR thing makes it better. It's not a core of it. I think in the long run, being inside the game instead of seeing it through a screen is better. We'll get there, right? But that's not what matters. Likewise, I didn't mention blockchain or cryptocurrency or Web3. Like some of those things, I don't want to dismiss them. They could eventually be interesting. They could eventually be a foundation, but that's not why people want to use it. Why people want to use it is they want to instantiate an alternate them that lets them live the life they want to live, possibly many alternate thems at different times with different groups of people, and do really fun things together. And like, not have to switch apps and not have to regroup up and not have to really think about it. And like, if you think about it that way, the metaverse starts to make a lot more sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the primary things that I find interesting about these platforms, that there is no, switching cost. If I show up with something for people to do, they're already there, and they don't have to like abandon something else to go.
They already know the control. They already have the characters.
Exactly.
It's really a question of, are you providing them and perhaps their group of friends something interesting to do that is worthwhile? And if you are, the monetization works itself out later because they're getting utility and value. And people, when they're getting utility and value, are happy to pay for it. And it'll all just work out. And so to me, it's like, can we create systems where people can go to see if they have fun doing things, and they'll find things that are fun for them, and that'll spawn new things that are in that ilk that are just extensions of that.
Yeah. Did you start at Oculus before it was acquired by Meta?
Brendan, who was the CEO, asked me to join the company before Facebook acquired it. I turned him down, mainly because I didn't think he had enough money as a startup, regardless of whatever he might have raised, to launch a hardware. I had been at Sony. I knew how complicated that process is. It takes a Microsoft to launch a new hardware. It's not a simple thing to do. And I just didn't think a startup could do it. He called me 4 months later and said, "You heard the news. It had been announced that Facebook was going to acquire Oculus." I said, "Yeah, it was a bad financial move on my part to say no for those 4 months, but it was important to me that it was going somewhere and it was actually going to launch." And as you can see, it is a serious undertaking to not only launch effectively a new piece of hardware with a new ecosystem along the lines of iPhone or anything else like that, but also a totally new paradigm and input methodology in terms of display and the way that you interact with it. It is quite an undertaking, but I'm incredibly proud of what we've done over the last 9 years.
Well, you should be. I've been using each successive device, and they get a huge jump in quality, accessibility with each, and I think it's a really great experience.
Yeah, and the Quest 3 is an amazing device. Like if you haven't used that one,
I have the 2.
I have a 2. I got a chance to use a 3. I did a beta test for a friend who's developing something on there, and it's pretty slick. This is very slick. Is slick. Yeah.
The weight is like, it's better distribution of the weight. Pancake lenses are amazing. The screen resolution is awesome. And all of these things are coming together right now, as we said at Connect, with, the AI agents that we're working on. And when that gets, you could be social, but you could be social with an AI agent, and that will be very interesting because unlike the
what about suits?
NPCs and the suits, full body suits.
Yeah. Like feeling and temperature and.
Well, you have your AC. You could do it in no. We've announced some exploration we're doing with inferring what the rest of your body is doing. And my guess is that that'll be a lot more interesting in the short run than the full body suits that you see in films, which I think, are too cumbersome, at least for now, to be doing. But I think it's shocking what AI can do in inferring and knowing based on what should be happening in the world. And it's not always right, but there's some very interesting things going on right now that I think are more likely to take precedence. There's also hand controls in Quest 3. So you can see your hands and you can do things, select things with your hands and stuff like that. And we're getting, again, totally new paradigm. I'm incredibly proud of what Meta has done in the last 9 years. It seems like a huge amount of time. It's really not.
It's not.
I mean, it's one and a half GTAs.
You measure
Like
time
development
in
time.
terms of Grand Theft Autos.
Development
Yeah.
GTA.
So, do you think? I mean, you probably know what some of the roadmap looks like, but like how I imagine the evolution of how people will continue and evolve their immersion in these worlds. I got to imagine that the device is going to continue to improve, but also shrink. So, the Ray-Ban glasses that you guys were showing off, is that a form factor that we could expect at someday to be able to get that kind of immersion, do you think?
Well, the Ray-Bans have lenses which, you can see through. And the thing about either MR, mixed reality, or VR, and to me, VR is part of mixed reality, is that the screen can go black and lenses can't go black. So there's an additive light versus subtractive light difference there.
Yeah.
But I can't really talk about the roadmap, but like at some point, yeah, you want it to be as light as possible, and you want it to be as inobtrusive as possible. That said, I mean, the Quest 3 is like ski goggles, and I don't know if you did any of the mixed reality stuff on Quest 3, but like being able to see the world around you and then suddenly something pops up, like, it feels like it's there. And we're just getting started. Like it's really different than full immersive VR.
Yeah,
It's like kind of like that really is magic happening. And you can see a world in which like the world is just very different than the physics-based world that we've all lived in the past. And things just, they just happen. And you just see things that don't exist. It's wild.
Are you familiar with the theory that we're all living in a simulation?
I am aware of that theory. I don't think
He went to Hebrew school, dude. Come on.
I learned nothing. I told you. I'm not nearly smart enough to know whether or not it's practically, the case.
Neuralink.
I understand the theory that like someone else at some point would have figured out something that effectively,
But
so we'll do it. It's
I know, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like you're building a simulation inside the simulation. It's meta.
This is what I'm thinking. Is like you're going to have a house, and there's going to be nothing in the house, and all your decorations are going to be like fake. Like you're going to have this thing on, and you're going to see paintings up, and then posters, and then you take them off, and there's nothing there.
I think it'll be both. So the one thing that I think needs to be said over and over again is you can't replace real interactions, real people in reality. Like as creatures, that is who we are. But reality is going to get a hell of a lot more interesting. And when you're tired of reality or just want to take a break, there's other interesting things to do too.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to look at these technologies is like, what do I used to, when I was a 7-year-old, I'd tune out and go to a movie, right? And then there's tuning out and playing video games. Well, that doesn't mean that I didn't fall in love and have children and care incredibly for them. And now we're tuning out by playing video games together. And like, that won't change. Humanity is humanity.
Absolutely. Play and entertaining ourselves it's part of who we are as a species.
It's innate.
This is a legit curiosity I have because you said it takes a Microsoft, but it takes a Meta to build what you guys are building.
Yes.
And, there's a lot of technology that technology advances so quickly. There's stuff we have today that even 2 years ago, like everything we have in generative AI didn't really exist 2 years ago. Have you guys started thinking about like what's the world actually going to be like 5 years from now, and how do we with forethought try to have some be deliberate about engineering? That doesn't sound weird, I don't know if this is the right words, but engineering good outcomes for humanity. I know it sounds really big and weird, and I don't know that it's really your responsibility to do that, but maybe it is because you're making it. I don't know. I'm just curious if that's part of the conversation as you guys are coming up with ideas for what this platform can do and how people are going to use it and what are
like ethics.
Oh, yeah, like as it's successful, like what's our lives like who knew when the iPhone came out that I'd be trying to have a conversation with my daughter and she's not present, and was listening to the guy who invented Infinite Scroll, who when he talks about it, it's like, oh, this is a simple little piece of code, and I did it for this reason, but because it has this impact, like the way people engage with their devices and stuff, etc. It's just, I'm curious. How much of that do you guys think about?
Are you not being evil?
It's not evil, because you can't predict. I don't think you can predict like how people are.
Well, you don't
because
know, right?
you build
That's
a
true.
platform, and part of building a platform is to put the tools and the experience in the hands of the users, and then you have emergent behavior that layers on top of that, and that's part of the value of the platform, is that things emerge from it. And it's I'm not trying to ask like a leading question or like a like a trapping question. It's a legit curiosity. I don't think any of us know what things are going to be like in 5 or 10 years. And now that I have kids, I kind of wonder what the world they're gonna, when they have kids, what's their world going to be like? It's really more of a question of like how do you think we're going to all be interacting with each other in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah. So I can't answer that question specifically, but I do know that yes, we are constantly thinking about what we're building. And I would also say, and this is something, I came on the show to talk about kind of my past and my personal experience, that integrity and doing the right thing has always been incredibly important to me. And I've tried to build my business and my entire career based on doing right by people and try not to create enemies. And I don't have that many, and doing the right thing by humanity and creating things that make people's lives better. And that's effectively what I set out to do at 15 in a goofy way, but what I was very intent with at Naughty Dog, in building a company that was diverse and had, built the right kind of games that people loved and that were net positive for people. And if I felt for a moment personally, like I was in a place where that wasn't the desire, I couldn't continue to work there. And I've been at Meta now for 9 years and feel very, very comfortable where I am. So that's probably the best I can do to answer this.
When we're building things and new things, it's also iterative, and the pace of technology changes so quickly.
For sure.
I find it fascinating just how different my kids' lives are than mine, and just trying to think about like what, when they have kids, what their parenting experience is going to be like, and what their kids' experience is going to be like. And I don't know if I could picture it, because it's so far away.
For sure. And, I as I've said multiple times, I have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old. So I am constantly thinking, what is the world going to be like for them? And it's going to be very different than it was for me when I was a kid. I mean, the things that my mother was worried about for me, heavy metal, comic books, video games, they turned out to be okay.
Yes.
I still listen to heavy metal, by the way, and I still play. And I'm allowing my kids to do those things. My 10-year-old likes AC/DC and Metallica, and good for her. That stuff back then was right on the border of your kid's in trouble. And for me, it's like, she likes good music.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she'll like something I hate in a few years, but at least for now, I can enjoy it. But yeah, it matters to me greatly what their futures are.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of technology. One of the things I have fear of is that there will be a future where technology is accessible to some and not accessible to others. And Meta seems like it's built its business on being accessible to everybody.
For sure. And in a lot of cases, not in any way for profit. Like the amount of profit that comes out of WhatsApp in the corners of the world where it literally is life or death for people. I go to Africa every year. I think I have some of the pictures publicly on my page from this year and last year on my Facebook page. And you're a fisherman off the coast of Africa and you're coming in a port. And if everybody goes to the same port with the same fish, the value of that fish is less than if you went to one port north, a little farther away. And like they use their phones to communicate, and the communication tool they're using is WhatsApp.
Right.
And so there's plenty of stuff that and that's just one example, like everywhere all over the world where you go, like people are using Meta stuff and most of them pay not a penny for it. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's great. And it is improving lives.
Random question. Have you guys thought about buying Unity? Did that ever come across the the desk.
Unity is another one of those democratizing things. And I think where they went wrong, if they went wrong, is that they forgot that they are a democratizing thing. And they're doing good for a lot of people by giving the small fry an ability to put a product out without having to write their own engine like you did back in the day.
Right, right. My question was sort of half funny, but also
I know.
but also half not funny.
Half
Like,
funny.
are there user facing tools that you are releasing to the public?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Like the metaverse stuff. Like, are people gonna be able to create like in UEFN and like that's what makes it interesting, right?
Right
Is that
now,
I
if
can
you
create.
go into Horizon Worlds, you can create using tools that have nothing to do with any of those engines, and you can publish to Horizon Worlds. There is some monetization. We're still much earlier on that than, for example, the Fortnite worlds that you're working in are. But it is entirely our intention to provide soup to nuts tools that are provided for in the publishing agreement that you go through with Horizon. In other words, you don't have to pay to license the engine. You don't have to pay for the servers. You don't have to pay for any of the other stuff. It's just whatever the fee is that you pay on whatever monetization you bring in. If you don't bring in a monetization, it's all free.
Yeah, okay.
That is the plan, and that exists right now. As we get larger, I know you probably have heard we're now out on mobile devices. We're going to continue that through mobile devices, and that'll reach a lot more people. That is 2D screens, so you can reach 1 billion users there. And there is an engine you can build in. It's constantly getting worked on. I have an incredible amount of respect for both Epic's, engine and Unity's engine. So it's, I don't in any way suggest we're going to be there tomorrow. But we'll continue to improve it. And there's probably a subset of those engines that you need in that space. You don't need the full capabilities that those engines have because you're not making a AAA $200 million title. So there's just some functionality that you don't need. But yeah, that is the plan. The plan is to do that. Having said that, we've been partners with Unity and partners with Epic throughout virtual reality's, kind of journey, and that there's no way we could have done it without those engines, which again is why I say it is very democratizing that those engines exist, because that's hard work to create that stuff. And if you've got to do that before you put your game out, well, your game just got a hell of a lot more expensive before you've done anything entertaining. So, again, to me, the whole situation with Unity is unfortunate. Like, whose fault it is and all of that, you leave to everybody to have their own opinion. But it's unfortunate that we are where we are today. I have a great amount of respect for John, as I said, and I have a great amount of respect for Unity and the developers that are working on it. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Cool. All right, Jason.
All right.
It was great spending an afternoon with you. We kept you way over an hour.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out, Jason.
I hope it was okay. I was asking you to gaze into the future, the crystal ball of the future. It is really fascinating time to be alive with what everybody's working on, isn't it?
The one thing I will say in my 40 years of working in the game industry is the rate of change has never been faster than it is now. And just things keep happening that utterly change everything. AI generation utterly changes everything. It just utterly changes everything. I wrote a math program for my 10-year-old, and all of the art and all of the voices took me probably an hour and a half that you would have used to take weeks. And so all it was a bunch of scripting and that I probably could have done with a scripting tool, but I just didn't bother. It's just insane how things have changed in that amount of time. Insane.
All right. Well, it was great. It was great to catch up and chat.
Yep. Wait, hold on. One last question. When you were at Facebook, when you started that Facebook company, who was your number one friend at the top? Who was your number one
friend at the top?
Yeah, you had to have like your friends in order, and I was like, I bet you it's Andy. Remember, you could have like your friends list on MySpace.
And MySpace. My friend. I thought you said Facebook, because I don't remember.
Oh, sorry, Facebook.
Okay, yeah.
I always get it mixed up.
No. At MySpace, I was not friends with Tom. I remember that.
No, Andy, your other friend, was he your number one?
I honestly,
you don't want to say. All right. You don't
remember. I'd have to go back to the screenshot. Yes. I really don't remember. Andy was certainly up there and could have been. I was single and dating, so who knows what was the.
That's right. So, I was thinking, And I told you this when we got off the interview. I said, that guy's going to be the super CEO of something. Remember? You know what I mean? Because it's like,
because he's so well put together, like super
like
articulate. Yeah.
You could throw anything at him and he's the kind of guy you want to like answer questions that are the hardest, I think, in the room. It takes a certain personality and mental fortitude to be able to, like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you've been in those rooms. You turn it on and off. I've seen you do it. We talked about this. And it's a skill. It's like, and some people have it and some people don't, And
what
yeah.
Unpack that a little bit. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, I'll give you an example. Cliff Bleszinski talked about this too. He hated going in front of, and you've heard this kind of thread through a lot of the people we spoke to. Like, it's kind of like being a general, right? You're going to make decisions that are going to impact people's lives, and some people can do this and sleep like a baby. Like, go home and just be like, I'm gonna take a nap, and go to bed, and have no angina, no high blood pressure, nothing going on. There's other people that it's like, oh, I said that thing and it probably hurt the feelings of four people in the room, and then they can't sleep, and then it ruins their, you know what I'm saying? Because it takes that mental fortitude to be able to like say the hard stuff, hear the hard stuff, and then navigate through the stuff. Like, I remember, like, from the art side, I remember whenever we were trying to meet a milestone in my younger years, and a programmer did something or a designer did something, and then it like messed up what I was doing, and then I would have a meltdown. Do you know what I mean? Because I wasn't mature enough. But now as a professional, it's like, let's do this. You just kind of like, so that's like that example. But there's the other one where it's like people, managing big ideas, managing so many disciplines, and then being able to like be on top of it all the time.
I do know what you mean. Like, what do you think that is? I mean, part of that is maturity, part of that is just you're in those situations enough that you realize, well, the world isn't going to actually fall apart here. So let's just figure out like what to do and how to get there. But there's another part of it too that's not just experience, right? Confidence, and it's a little bit of demeanor too, right? It's like, what an incredible career from starting at publishing the first game at 13 to Crash Bandicoot to being in charge of THQ to running for the metaverse, building the metaverse.
Yes, I don't know if you could hear me. I kind of said it over both of y'all while y'all were talking, but I think the next big thing in the industry is going to be the metaverse wars.
I did not hear you say that.
I said it, and I said when I was in New Orleans, I kept telling people it's going to be the next big thing. The metaverse wars you watch, it's going to be who has the coolest metaverse.
Is it like VHS versus Betamax kind of thing?
Yeah, probably. Like, because people are going to want content, and it's like, where do you go? Is
the world a better place or a worse place if one metaverse wins?
I think it's going to be like Mac PC. Like, you're going to be able to jump from metaverse to metaverse eventually.
Well, which one's the Mac and which one's the PC?
I would say Meta will be like PC and Mac will be like UEFN. Or vice versa. And you're going to be able to jump between the two.
Vice versa? That's like the Mac was the cool, the hip kid, and PC was like the nerdy kid with the rich parents. Yeah, so.
The rich parents. Yeah.
All right.
But I think that's next. You keep your eyes open, folks.
All right.
Metaverse Wars.
You heard it here first. Metaverse Wars. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for another week of The Fourth Curtain. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we shall see you next time.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Fourth Curtain Podcast. To get a peek at upcoming episodes or to send in questions to the show, visit our site at thefourthcurtain.com. And be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.